London, a damp evening in Mayfair. Gleaming cars lined the pavement outside a renowned restaurant, the kind of place where a single meal could swallow a week's wages. Inside, beneath the golden glow of chandeliers and the soft chime of glasses, a man sat quietly at table 12. David Turner, a 38-year-old architect, wore a suit that had seen better days. It was neatly pressed, yet its worn fabric betrayed the truth. Opposite him sat Lily, his 7-year-old daughter, her blonde hair tied back, proudly wearing a cheap princess dress she adored. She kept glancing at the door, waiting for the woman her father had promised would join them. On David's phone, a message appeared. "I don't date losers who already come with baggage. I just saw you through the window with their child. Pathetic." Each word pierced his chest like a blade. His hands trembled as he reread the text, clinging to the faint hope he had misunderstood. But no, Caroline, the woman he had hoped might share his future, had abandoned him and his daughter in their very first meeting. "Daddy, isn't she coming?" Lily's voice was soft, her wide eyes searching his face. David quickly turned off the screen and forced a smile, though his eyes gave him away. Around them, subtle sneers lingered. The waiter, impatient, stood at their table. "Sir, will you be ordering?" "This table has been sitting empty for over 40 minutes. His tone carried a chill that made David's stomach twist. David hesitated. Even the cheapest bottle of water here cost as much as 3 days' worth of meals for them. Yet for his daughter's sake, he tried to preserve a shred of dignity. "We'll wait just a little longer." Lily lowered her head and whispered, "Daddy, I'm hungry." And then something unexpected happened. At the next table, a woman set down her glass of wine with quiet elegance. She had a refined face, chestnut hair pulled neatly back, and a blue dress that seemed to belong to another world. Her name was Eleanor Whitmore, one of the wealthiest women in London, though in this room no one recognized her at once. From her seat she had seen everything. The desperate hope in David's eyes when he arrived with his daughter, the way he nervously checked his phone again and again, and finally the cruel words that had flashed across his screen. When Lily's worn-out doll tumbled to the floor and rolled to her feet, Eleanor bent down to pick it up. In her hands lay a threadbare toy, clumsily stitched together with mismatched threads, loved to the point of falling apart. Just like that man's eyes, she thought, worn yet filled with love. And in that instant she made a decision. She would not let them leave this place humiliated. Eleanor rose from her chair and walked confidently toward table 12. Her voice carried warmth and familiarity, though it was all invention. "David Turner? I can't believe it. How long has it been since the architecture conference in Oxford?" David froze, confused. Lily stared up at the stranger with wide, curious eyes. And from that moment, everything began to change. The room grew still for a moment as Eleanor slid gracefully into the empty chair at David's table, placing the doll gently back into Lily's arms. The waiter's scowl faltered, curiosity flickered in his eyes. Clearly, this woman wasn't just another guest. "Oxford?" David echoed, bewildered. He had never met this woman before. Yet her confidence was so seamless he found himself nodding despite the confusion. Lily, hugging her doll tightly, blinked up at Eleanor. "Do you really know my daddy?" she asked in her small, innocent voice. "Of course," Eleanor replied smoothly, offering the girl a smile that warmed the edges of her refined expression. "Your father is one of the most talented architects I've ever met. We spoke about heritage projects, didn't we, David?" The waiter, suddenly all politeness, hovered with a forced smile. "Madam, may I bring you the dessert menu?" Eleanor glanced at him coolly. "Bring us the dessert menu and a bottle of champagne. We're celebrating an old friendship." The change in the waiter's demeanor was instant. Gone was the sharp tone. He nearly bowed as he rushed away. David leaned forward, his voice low. I don't know who you are, but I can't pay for this. Eleanor's hand brushed his, briefly steady and calm. Just play along, she whispered. No one should be treated the way you were. Then, turning to Lily, she asked with genuine curiosity, Do you like chocolate? The little girl's face lit up, nodding eagerly. It's my favorite. Mine too, Eleanor grinned. There's a dessert here that tastes like a cloud. Would you share it with me? As Lily clapped her hands in delight, David studied this stranger who had suddenly stepped into his life. She wore no wedding ring. Her eyes, though strikingly beautiful, carried something else, an undercurrent of sadness, as though she knew too well what it meant to sit alone, unwanted. Why are you doing this? He murmured. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. Because I know how it feels to be left behind while others pity you. And any woman who walks away from a man who loves his child the way you do is a fool. For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by Lily's giggles as she listened to the waiter, now overly friendly, describe the chocolate soufflé. And then something stirred inside David's chest. It was faint, almost forgotten. Hope. He extended his hand awkwardly. David Turner. Her grip was firm, her smile subtle. Just Eleanor. As the champagne arrived and Lily raised her glass of orange juice in a clumsy toast, Eleanor's presence wrapped around the table like a shield. For the first time in years, David didn't feel invisible. Yet as he studied her polished grace and the faint shadow behind her eyes, he couldn't help but wonder, who exactly was this woman? And what story was she hiding? The soufflé arrived at the table in a delicate cloud of steam. Lily's eyes widened in awe, as if a miracle had been placed before her. She dug in with childlike excitement, chocolate smudging her lips. Her laughter was soft, but it cut through David's gloom like sunlight breaking storm clouds. For the first time that evening, he exhaled without pain. Yet beneath the comfort lingered unease. Who was this woman really? Why would someone like her, elegant, poised, clearly belonging to a different world, step into his misery? Daddy, she's nice, Lily whispered between spoonfuls, her voice muffled by dessert. She smells like flowers, like Mummy. David's throat tightened. Maria, his late wife, had worn jasmine perfume. He swallowed hard, forcing down the sudden ache in his chest. Eleanor noticed. Your wife? She asked gently, lowering her voice so Lily wouldn't hear. She died 3 years ago, David admitted, his words clipped. Car accident. A flicker crossed Eleanor's face, something almost like recognition of grief. But she didn't pry. Instead, she raised her glass. Then tonight we celebrate her too, for the life she gave and the love she left behind. David stared at her, bewildered. No one had ever said something like that. Not his colleagues, not the parents at Lily's school, not even his family who had quietly drifted away when his struggles became too heavy to watch. But before gratitude could form, the waiter returned with the leather-bound bill. He placed it carefully, but his eyes betrayed mischief. David froze. He hadn't ordered anything. And Eleanor, with a calm flick of her wrist, reached for the folder. When she opened it, a subtle flash of surprise crossed her features. The amount wasn't small. Even for her, it was steep. But she pulled out a sleek black card without hesitation. On me, she said lightly, though David caught the flicker of tension in her smile. The waiter took the card, disappeared, then returned moments later, his expression oddly triumphant. I'm afraid there's a problem with your card, madam. David's stomach plummeted. He had seen this humiliation before, when bills exceeded his means. He braced for Eleanor's embarrassment, yet what followed only deepened the mystery. That's impossible, Eleanor replied coolly, though a shadow crept across her face. Run it again. It's not the amount. the waiter murmured, lowering his voice. "The name doesn't match." For a heartbeat, David saw it. Eleanor's mask slipping just slightly. She covered quickly, producing a wad of crisp notes from her clutch, enough to pay twice over. The waiter bowed deeply, retreating with the bill, but David's eyes lingered on her. She wasn't just a stranger. She was hiding something. As they left the restaurant together, Lily nestled in her father's arms, already dozing. Eleanor walked beside them, her heels clicking softly against the pavement. "You didn't have to do that," David said quietly. "Yes, I did," she answered, her gaze fixed straight ahead. "Sometimes it's easier to be just Eleanor, not who the world thinks I am." And in that single sentence, David knew this woman carried secrets far heavier than her graceful smile betrayed. The night air outside Mayfair was brisk, carrying the scent of rain on old stone. David adjusted Lily in his arms. She was fast asleep, her little head resting on his shoulder, her princess dress crumpled like forgotten silk. Eleanor walked beside him, silent for a time, her heels clicking faintly on the wet pavement. At the curb, David paused by his battered Ford Focus, an old model that groaned with age. He caught Eleanor glancing at it. For a moment he thought he saw a flicker of surprise, then pity. But just as quickly her expression softened into something gentler. "I can call you a cab," David offered awkwardly, though he could barely afford such generosity. Eleanor shook her head. "I have my own car nearby." She gestured vaguely down the street, carefully hiding the sleek black Mercedes waiting in the shadows. "But thank you, David, for tonight." He blinked, startled. "For tonight? You were the one who saved us." She smiled faintly and reached to brush a loose strand of hair from Lily's cheek. "No, you saved me. You reminded me there are still people who live honestly, even when the world looks down on them." Their eyes met, and for a breath, the street seemed quieter, more intimate, as if the city itself held its breath. But the spell broke with the shrill buzz of Eleanor's phone. She glanced down. 17 missed calls. Her jaw tightened. With a practiced motion, she silenced the device and slipped it back into her bag. David noticed curiosity tugging at him. Yet he didn't ask. Not yet. Instead, he said softly, "Whoever you are, Eleanor, you didn't deserve to be at that table tonight. But thank you. For Lily." She gave a quick nod, then stepped back into the dark. Watching her go, David felt something stir, something dangerous. Hope was a luxury he hadn't dared to feel in years. The next morning, in a glass tower overlooking the Thames, Eleanor faced a storm. "Are you out of your mind?" Margaret Whitmore, her mother, slammed a newspaper down on the marble desk. The headline read, "Heiress of Whitmore Telecom spotted dining incognito in Mayfair." Eleanor didn't flinch. She sipped her coffee slowly. "Good morning to you too, Mother." "I had Robert on the phone all night," Margaret snapped. "My daughter using false names, paying cash in backstreet games. Do you have any idea what this looks like?" Eleanor closed her laptop with deliberate calm. "It looks like I had dinner, that's all." "It looks like weakness." Her mother's tone was sharp, honed by decades in boardrooms. "The Whitmore family does not consort with widowed architects from Hackney. We negotiate mergers, not pity projects." "His name is David Turner," Eleanor said evenly, "and he restores buildings that would otherwise collapse into dust. That's more meaningful than any of our soulless towers of glass." Margaret's eyes narrowed, icy with calculation. "Cancel whatever plans you have with him. The Japanese investors arrive today at noon, and if this man thinks he can worm his way into our world, he'll learn quickly. He cannot." Eleanor rose from her chair, slipping on a simple jacket instead of her usual tailored armor. Her reply was calm but firm. "I'm meeting him, and you can't stop me." Her mother's laugh was cold, echoing through the glass office. We'll see about that. Monday afternoon, the smell of poster paint and glue sticks filled the primary school hall in Hackney. Folding chairs creaked under the weight of proud parents. Smartphones hovered, ready to record every line, every costume wobble. On stage, children rustled in paper leaves and cardboard crowns. "Daddy, she's here!" Lily squealed, spotting Eleanor in the doorway. Dressed simply in jeans and a pale blouse, Eleanor slipped into the room, breathless from rushing across the city. She had left a boardroom of executives mid-sentence to be here, and for once she didn't regret it. David exhaled with relief as she joined them. "I thought you wouldn't make it," he whispered. "I wouldn't miss it," she replied. The lights dimmed. The play began. Children recited lines about trees, birds, and the turning of seasons. Lily, in her oversized paper crown, stepped forward proudly to say her part. Eleanor felt something tug inside her chest. For the first time in years, she wasn't Eleanor Whitmore, corporate heiress. She was simply part of something that mattered. But just as she allowed herself to breathe, a too familiar voice sliced through the moment. "Well, if it isn't Miss Whitmore herself," a woman drawled. It was Patricia Doyle, a senator's wife Eleanor knew from endless charity galas. Patricia's smile was sharp as glass. "Imagine finding you here, supporting the local schools now. Is this another foundation project of your mother's?" David's head snapped toward Eleanor, confusion darkening his features. "Whitmore?" he echoed under his breath. Eleanor froze. The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. Parents nearby turned, whispers rippling through the rows of chairs. Patricia, delighted with the stir she had caused, continued blithely. "Your family's merger is all over the Financial Times. I suppose even billion-pound deals leave room for community work." Lily's voice carried from the stage. "Look, Daddy, Miss Eleanor is watching me." Her face glowed with pride, her words slicing through the growing tension. But David wasn't smiling. His jaw was tight, his fists clenched. "Whitmore?" he repeated, louder this time, his voice trembling between disbelief and betrayal. "David, please," Eleanor began, but he stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. "You're one of them," he hissed. "The glass towers, the world that crushed people like me while you played at being kind." "No," Eleanor whispered desperately, reaching for his arm. "It wasn't like that. Not with you. Not with Lily." On stage, Lily scanned the audience, confused by the sudden silence. "Daddy, are you watching?" David's voice was barely audible, but it cut through Eleanor like steel. "Was this all just a game to you? A way to feel better about your life?" Tears burned Eleanor's eyes. She shook her head, words spilling out in fragments. "You were real. You were the only thing that was real." But David was already turning away, his daughter calling after him from the stage. The hall blurred with whispers, Patricia's triumphant smirk, and the sound of a paper crown rustling as Lily stumbled on her line. Eleanor stood rooted to the floor, her secret finally exposed. And for the first time since she was a child, she felt powerless. The school hall emptied quickly after the performance. Parents collected their children, their chatter a mix of praise and gossip. But for David, the world had narrowed to a single truth. The woman who had sat at his kitchen table, who had laughed with his daughter, who had pretended to be just Eleanor, was in fact Eleanor Whitmore. The Whitmore name was everywhere in London. Gleaming telecom skyscrapers, headlines about billion-pound mergers, the family whose money could buy or break almost anything. "You lied," David said hoarsely as they stepped into the cool afternoon outside the school. His hand clutched Lily's small one, as though she might vanish too. "I didn't lie," Eleanor pleaded. "I just didn't tell you everything." "That's the same thing," he snapped. His eyes, usually gentle, burned with disappointment. Do you think we're entertainment for you? Some little charity project you could hide behind? Lily tugged at his hand, her eyes wide. Daddy, don't be mad at her. She came to see me. She's my friend. But David couldn't look at Eleanor. Friends don't build relationships on lies. His voice cracked. Patricia Doyle swept past them with her son in tow, her voice pitched loud enough for all to hear. Honestly, it's what the rich do, isn't it? Toy with the poor until they get bored. Eleanor flinched, shame burning her skin. She turned to David, desperate. Please, let me explain. I never used you. I needed you. Needed both of you. More than I realized. But David shook his head, holding Lily close. Go back to your towers, Eleanor. Leave us be. With that, he walked away, his daughter looking over her shoulder with tears brimming in her eyes. The days that followed were a blur of silence and regret. David threw himself into work, restoring crumbling plaster and cracked stone in an old Georgian terrace. Yet every sound of hammer against wall echoed with Eleanor's absence. Lily grew quieter, pushing her food around her plate, asking each night if Eleanor would visit again. David had no answers. Meanwhile, across the river in a penthouse of glass and chrome, Eleanor faced her mother's fury. Margaret's voice lashed like a whip. This is precisely why you cannot live like ordinary people. You've humiliated this family. That man will never fit in our world. Eleanor, drained but defiant, replied softly, Perhaps it's your world that doesn't fit me anymore. Margaret's eyes narrowed. You'll end this, Eleanor, or I'll end him. Those words chilled her more than any corporate threat. She knew her mother had the power to ruin David's contracts, choke his projects, and leave him with nothing. That night, Eleanor sat alone in her vast apartment, stripped of its glamour. On her phone screen, one photograph glowed, David, Lily, and herself squeezed together, laughing in a messy kitchen. No jewelry, no titles, no lies. Just a moment of truth. She whispered into the empty room, I'll fix this. Somehow, I'll make it right. And for the first time in her life, Eleanor Whitmore prepared to stand against her own family. Weeks passed, but the wound did not close. David's projects, already fragile, began to collapse like dominoes. First, a bank withdrew funding without warning. Then 2 clients abruptly cancelled contracts. Each time, he saw the invisible hand behind it. Whitmore power was vast, and Margaret had made her threat clear. By late November, David was left staring at unpaid bills and half-finished walls. Lily, sensing the strain, tried to cheer him with drawings and silly songs, but even her laughter could not disguise the hollow in his eyes. One evening, the phone rang. Against his better judgment, he answered. David. Eleanor's voice was low, almost breaking. Please, let me come. Not for me. For Lily. For a moment, silence. Then he whispered, She cries for you every night. The following morning, Eleanor arrived not in silk and diamonds, but in jeans, hair pulled back, carrying a paper bag of pastries from a Hackney bakery. When Lily saw her, she ran straight into her arms as though weeks of heartbreak had never happened. See, Daddy? I told you she would come back. Eleanor stayed, and over tea at the worn kitchen table, she spoke. No rehearsed lines, no careful mask. She told them everything. The suffocating expectations, the empire, her family guarded like a crown, the truth of why she had hidden her name. I was afraid, she admitted. Afraid you'd see me as one of them, not as me. David listened in silence, jaw tight. And now what? You walk away from it all? Her answer was steady, almost shocking herself. Yes, if it means I can be here, with you, With Lily, I'll walk away. That night, Eleanor faced the full weight of her choice. In her mother's office, Margaret's fury was volcanic. You would throw away decades of legacy, for what? For a man with paint on his sleeves and a child clinging to him. For love, Eleanor said simply. Margaret's laugh was sharp, almost cruel. Love! Love doesn't pay for power. Love doesn't keep the Whitmore empire standing. You're a fool. Maybe, Eleanor replied, but at least I won't be a lonely fool. For a long moment, silence crackled between them. Then Margaret leaned close, her words venomous. If you step out of line, Eleanor, don't expect this family to protect you. You'll lose everything. I've already lost the only thing that mattered, Eleanor answered, and I intend to win it back. Days turned into weeks of battle. Margaret pushed harder, cutting off accounts, severing Eleanor from family trust funds, pulling strings to stall David's restoration projects. But Eleanor fought back in ways no one expected. She used her education, her contacts, her sharp mind. She began attending David's sites, helping with reports, meeting local investors not for profit but for passion. Slowly, others began to see not the heiress, but a woman determined to rebuild something real. And one evening when David looked at her across the scaffolding dust and broken plaster, he saw not Whitmore's daughter, but Eleanor, the woman who had chosen a crumbling terrace and a small family over an empire of glass. Spring arrived slowly in London. The grey drizzle gave way to patches of sunlight that lingered longer each day, spilling warmth across scaffolding and stone. On Old Street, a once derelict Georgian terrace was beginning to bloom into new life. David stood in the main hall, dust streaking his shirt, hands rough from weeks of labor. Yet in his eyes flickered something he hadn't felt in years: pride. The project had survived against the odds, thanks in no small part to Eleanor's stubbornness. She had convinced a group of local investors to support the restoration, not through her family name, but through sheer passion. That afternoon, as Lily skipped around the room with her oversized hard hat slipping over her eyes, Eleanor stepped in carrying sandwiches wrapped in brown paper. No designer handbags, no chauffeur waiting outside, just Eleanor smiling faintly, hair windswept from the walk. "Lunch break," she announced. David looked at her for a long moment, still wary, still wounded. Yet when Lily threw her arms around Eleanor's waist and declared, "She's part of the team now," something inside him softened. They ate together on a wooden beam, laughter mingling with the echo of hammers. For the first time, it felt like a family. Not perfect, not polished, but real. Later, when Lily fell asleep in a pile of dust sheets, David and Eleanor stepped outside. The street was quiet, sunlight slanting across the old brickwork. "You gave up everything," David said quietly. Eleanor shook her head. "No, I gave up nothing that mattered. What I found here, this is everything." He studied her, torn between gratitude and fear. "But your mother, your family, let them keep their empire of glass," she interrupted softly. "I'd rather build something with stone, with history, with you." For a long time, David said nothing. Then slowly he reached for her hand. His touch was hesitant, almost unsure, but he didn't let go. Months later, the building opened to the public, restored to its former glory. At the ceremony, a small plaque was unveiled: Whitmore Turner Restoration Project, a name Eleanor had insisted upon, not as a brand, but as a bridge. Crowds applauded as David spoke, his voice steady. "This isn't just about walls and windows. It's about second chances. And about the people who stand beside you when the world tries to tear you down." Eleanor watched him, tears brightening her eyes. She had lost wealth, status, and comfort, but she had gained something infinitely rarer: belonging. As the applause faded, Lily slipped her small hand into hers. Does this mean you'll stay with us forever? The girl asked. Eleanor bent down, pressing a kiss to her forehead. That depends, my love. Do you want me to? Lily grinned, eyes shining. More than anything. David, standing nearby, met Eleanor's gaze. For the first time, his smile was free of doubt. Ending. Open for the audience. Sometimes the greatest empires are not built of steel and glass, but of trust, forgiveness, and the courage to choose love over power. But tell me, would you risk everything you have, your name, your future, to protect a simple life with the people you love?